speaking of inventory, I mean, just to give everybody a scenario, anybody that was waiting for interest rates to go down or for housing prices to go down, this is just Smithtown trends, and I pulled these this morning. Median sold price in Smithtown right now is $725. Okay, it's gone up 4.7% since last year. So anybody that said last year that I'm going to wait till prices go down, they can't hang. They can't. It's not stable. They won't sustain these increases. Well, they've gone up 4.7%. Now you're up at 4.7%. Now you're going to dip the interest rate. That's just going to drive prices even higher, in my opinion. And so when you look at inventory, there's 37 homes available on the market today in Smithtown. Right? What's the date today? It's the 10th of January. Those homes are ranging from $499 to $2.99. So the range of homes that may be available to you in the 700s, there might only be 10 homes. Now you start to drop rates, and all the buyers that said, "Oh, I'm out of the market for now," all of a sudden you drop rates. All those buyers come back, and there's only 10 or 12 homes available in your price range. It's guaranteed to drive prices way higher.
So I want to step back and expand further on something Jim said and get Keith's opinion on it as well. So 4.5% roughly year over year,
Yep.
according to the metrics. So you might have a buyer that goes 4%, not the end of the world. Yes, it's more money, but it's not a lot. But think about the compounding over the last couple of years. In 20, it could have went up 10%. In 21, another 4. In 22, before you know it, well, we're looking at 4% year over year last year, but when you compound it with the last couple of years, that could be 20%. Mm-hmm. And then when you add a 20% on top of people willing to overpay, which we've all seen because there's no inventory, now that 20%, again, rough numbers, could be 30, 40%. So, 4% is not bad, but when you look back a couple of years, you could be paying $100,000 more than the house is worth.
And we've all come across people that we're going to put it off for a year, and 2 years, and 3 years. I can't tell you how many files I have in my cabinet right now. People I started talking to 3-4 years ago that are still. We talk every once in a while. They're just waiting, and while that's happening, the market is getting away from them. They're saving a little more for down payment, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they improve their credit a little more. They put themselves. And I'm not saying you should buy when you're not financially ready, but you got to be careful because there is always a concern. Well, what if I buy now and the prices go down a little bit? Well, unless you're looking to buy and flip a home where there's an immediate need to, if you're going to buy a home today and you want to flip it within the next 6 months or a year and the market's down 6 months or a year from now, that's a problem. Your model just didn't work, right? But most people buy homes to live in them for the long term, right? We don't know what the future has to hold, but in general, people buy homes to live in the long term.
Yeah.
And so let's say you buy now and the market goes down 5% next year. Similar to your friend, he made $250,000, or did he? No, if he sold his house today, he made $250,000.
Well, that's another thing. My brother used to be stock finance guy. Mm-hmm. Your home is only worth what it's worth on the day you decide to trade it. It's just when, take the emotional value off the table. Your home is a commodity. It's a stock, right? Mm-hmm. It's a stock. Mm-hmm. So the day you're ready to trade it is the day. That's the value on that day.
It's such a great example because let's say yesterday you bought Apple at $100 a share, right, and you wake up this morning and it's down 90 a share.
Right.
Well, you really didn't lose any money yet. You didn't lose any money because you didn't sell the asset. On paper, you lost money.
Yeah.
But when you look at homes as a real estate, really as an asset class, traditionally they've done very well. Yes, there's some dips. But historically, they have done very well, and there's great appreciation in real estate.
That's exactly where I was leading to. Is that so? Hypothetically, you buy a house today and you're down 5% next year. Historically, you're making money in real estate over the long term. Mm-hmm. So if it's a short-term play, you run the risk of the ups and downs. If it's a long-term, and forget about calling it a long-term play, we're talking about buying a place to live. Right? We have to live somewhere,
of course,
right? And we didn't even touch upon what rents are and things of that nature as well, right? So you have to live somewhere. So we've been focusing on the financial aspect of do we buy now, do we buy later, etc. At the end of the day, if you don't buy right now, you're still going to be paying rent, right? Or whatever it might be. You have a house, you're going to have a housing expense.
And I want to touch on the rent thing too. Actually, I'm glad you brought it up because although yes, there are additional expenses to owning a home versus renting. if you look at these communities that are being developed all across Long Island, rents $3,500, $4,000 for 1 2-bedroom apartment. Now the complex is stunning, there's amenities, you're not building any equity, and you are paying, if not the same, more than you'd be paying in a mortgage payment.
Yep.
You know, your first house, I mean, our first house, not that our house now is anything crazy, but our first house was a very simple 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom home, very modest, 80 by 100 lot, small. And, you know, when we got a little bit more financially better in life, right, we upgraded. But, you know, especially geared towards the first time home buyers, don't pay $4,000 a month in rent. Even if it's not the house of your dreams, build your equity, save some money, and get into the house.
Yeah.
And you never know. Like my friend, you know what? You buy that small house, and the market continues this trend for the next couple of years. Now all of a sudden, maybe you have another 150 in equity, and now you look to trade up, and you have some real coin.
And obviously you don't, isn't always a situation, but at the end of the day, that does happen a lot.
Yeah.
That's happened to me. I bought my first house, scraped together to put 5% down. 2 years later, I made 8% on my house in 2 years, and now I had a substantial down payment for my next house. Yes, the payment was higher, but I was in a different financial position at that time. Obviously you can't go into buying a home saying, well, I'm going to make money in my house in 2 years and trade up, etc. But at the end of the day, you need to have a house to live in, you need a place to live in, I should say. And more often than not, I mean, you probably know the statistics way better than the rest of us, you know, but you have a lot more up years than down years when it comes to real estate. Or the houses that our parents bought for in a $20,000 range in the 70s, you know, wouldn't be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I know it's all relative to salaries, but my parents had their house built new in I think the mid to late 70s. I think it cost them like $75,000. You know, and it's like you hear that and you're like, I'll take 5 of those, please.
Of course.
But it's funny because I would joke about it with my dad. The year my dad built his house, his salary was $15,000 or $12,000.
Yeah.
Right. So it's relative. You know.
Of course.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, so home values have gone like this.
Yeah.
And salaries have gone.
Fair point.
Not quite as much. You know, they don't go
at the same pace.
Yeah, they don't go as the same home. You know, salaries don't go at the same pace as home values. Go ahead.
When I graduated law school, I went to law school in Michigan. When I came home, I moved back to my parents' house. And my wife, now, was my girlfriend at the time, we had some initial discussions about moving in together. And I said to her, I don't want to rent. And we both lived at our parents' house while we were engaged for maybe like 6 months, 8 months until we saved a couple shekels and bought a house. Now she worked while I was away, so she had a lot to help us towards a down payment, and then we both jointly built on that. But for me, the quote unquote freedom of living together and not under our parents' roof didn't outweigh, I don't want to say it's a waste of money because we all need somewhere to live, but no return on my dollar. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
There was no return on my money.
Right.
And we elected not to do it.
No, when you talk about, we'll go back to the trajectory of salaries versus home values. You know, my father-in-law keyed in on some stuff because, again, he bought his house probably 50 years ago. $25,000, I think he said he paid for it. But his salary was probably $5,000, you know, a month or something.
A year.
Or a year, yeah.
He's doing pretty well then.
Yeah. The other thing that's come into factor is like back then they didn't have all of this instant gratification. They didn't have debit cards, so they couldn't spend money. Just I need that and spend. They didn't have all these restaurants. They didn't have Starbucks. They didn't have all this stuff, so it was much more attainable, I guess. Whereas buyers these days really have to watch what they're doing. They can't just run out and buy.
A lot more distractions. You need a lot more discipline now.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'm very big on needs versus wants.
Right.
Okay? And it goes right to the heart of your conversation. I want a Starbucks coffee in the morning, but I don't need to spend $8 on a coffee. Especially when I'm in a position to, as say I'm a first-time home buyer, especially when I'm in a position where I need to save money for a down payment, closing costs, so on and so forth, right? Needs versus wants, and it goes right to the heart of what you're saying is we live in a very instant gratification society, and I see it with my kids. They're very young, but I see it where, Netflix lags for a second, they're like up in arms. You know, but when we were kids, we had to wait 5 minutes of commercials before we can watch the rest of the TV show. So yeah, it's great to go out to the bars and clubs and to get your $10 Starbucks and this, that, and the next, but those are our wants, not need, right? Mm-hmm. To me, we need somewhere to live, and if that's a need, let's make it a really nice need, you know, to the best of our ability. Yeah. So, you know, I think part of the problem too is society dictated, especially with all the social media, and I have to have the Stanley Cup, and I have to have the Lululemon leggings, and, you know, I have to wear Armani suits and all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I get it. I was young. I was into that too at one point.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, it's just a different mindset.
Actually, what I do, I work a lot with first-time home buyers, and not every first-time home buyer that calls me up is ready to buy a house. Mm-hmm. They are mentally, but financially they're not. And so I actually have a lot of times what I call like long-term projects where we sit there, and it's tough because I'm not their parent or anything like that. I'm not their financial advisor. I'm their mortgage guy. But we sit down and we look at their whole big financial picture and try to build a path to get them there. And it takes restraint. And I've had people where I'll spend time with them and we'll say, let's check in every month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it might be until you get where you need to be. And I've had people who follow suit, and I can't believe how much debt they've paid off between now and then, because that's another thing. How much debt are you carrying when you're getting ready to buy a house? How much you have in savings, etc., helping out with the credit. I have other people that I talk to them a year later. It's like I never met with them. Yeah. So, but it takes that financial restraint. It takes making smart decisions. It takes priority, right? What's priority? I mean, if you don't ever want a home and you want to spend the last penny you have the day you die and things of that nature, you're fine renting your whole life. That's perfectly fine. But if you want to buy a home, certainly the three of us believe in buying a home when you're ready or whatnot. It does take sometimes decisions. You don't want to make some tough decisions, but at the end of the day, if it's going to get you where you need to be and you set your priorities right.
Yeah. I want to expand on that because I think you touched on something that often overgets looked, right? Let's be completely blunt. We're all in the business to make money. That's why we work. That's why everyone goes to their job, whatever their job is to make money. However, what you said, I think, is very important, needs to be touched on, is long-term projects, right? So when I went to Keith for my mortgage for our second home, we were in a different position financially, my wife and I, than when I bought my first home.
Of course.
When I bought my first home, and I worked with a different lender, I wasn't, I didn't know Keith at the time. I wanted the house, like you said. We probably stretched ourselves a little too thin at the time. But I had a lender who probably just wanted to make some money, which is okay. We all got to make money. I'm not knocking them for that. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes the advice that we don't want to hear is the best advice. Because I truly believe if I would have worked with Keith or someone similar to his mindset back then, he would have looked at the finances and said, yes, you can do this, but do you really want to?
Right.
Now, I might have overruled him and said, yeah, but at least he would have tried, as opposed to just, I don't want to say the first guy pushed it through, but there was never that conversation.
And I look at it when I sit with people. I just did this the other day with a friend of mine. We looked at things and we said, can I get you a mortgage? Yes. Here's your payment. Here's what you bring home. I said, the mortgage guidelines feel this is not a risky proposition. You can qualify. However, let's just take a look at the numbers. So there's what the bank can give you. There's also, you need to look in the mirror and you need to sit there and say, okay, look, what's my budget really look like?
Life.
Right? Because here's the thing, what am I looking at? I'm looking at your pay stubs, your W-2s and your tax returns. I'm looking at your credit report. I'm looking at your bank statement. I don't know, none of those things tell me that you go on these very elaborate vacations a few times a year. Or do you cut coupons and do you eat mac and cheese? And I'm using some pretty big extremes here. But, the mortgage guidelines are set for every person, so there's this kind of general, exactly. Yeah. And so unfortunately they don't go as deep as, and I don't think things would get done if they did get a little more specific, personalized things. So that's why I try to have those conversations with people. And even when I sat and we talked, I didn't know every little nuance to your whole financial life. Just again, what presented itself on paper. So having that conversation. That's great that I did it, but also it takes you as an adult making adult decisions to, okay, great, we have conversations and I as a mortgage person, but we also need to look ourselves in the mirror and sit there and say, you can't sit there and say, wow, the bank said I can get this mortgage, I'm going for it.
Yeah, well,
15 years ago, that's what happened a lot.
Well, that's a good point to bring up. And so 2 points, it really matters who you work with. Because like Steve said, there are people out there that they'll just process a loan. Right, and maybe they're without bad intentions. Maybe they're putting you in a precarious situation where you're bootstrapped to afford that home. So it really matters to sit down with a loan officer who's actually going to go over all your financial details and really care about what the end result is going to be. I think that's super important.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's two, and I'm not the only person who takes that special care, but unfortunately, there is quite a few people, people are buying homes and taking mortgages just so they can get commissions. That's why they're buying
Listen,
homes.
you have good and bad bankers, good and bad real estate, good and bad attorneys, good and bad doctors, good and bad this, good and bad that, right?
Correct.
So the importance, as Jim said, of who you work with really does matter. I am at the point in my life, and I know you two are as well, where it's okay if that one client doesn't end up buying the house because of some issue. I can still pay my mortgage, I can still feed my kids. I don't need to jam a deal down someone's throat.
Yeah.
And when you really are truly working with a person like that who really does have your best interest at heart, it makes the world of a difference. Now, I do a lot of teaching for brokers, right? And I always have the same little spiel I weave into the class. And the class and the spiel is, don't start referring me to your clients because I came and brought bagels and did this presentation to you. Ask me to lunch. Find out how many deals I've done. What do I practice on? What's my opinion on this? What do I look out for in contracts? How do I handle communication during a deal, right? All too often we get referred and people just assume I got the deal, right? I do think we still need to earn people's trust. Now, one thing too that I think people tend to forget is some people poo-poo it's real estate. Oh, not a big deal. I know for myself, and I assume for you two, and probably for 99.9% of the Americans out there, this is the largest amount of money we've ever spent in one shot, and will ever spend in one shot.
Right.
I'm not going to skip out on the inspector who's $100 cheaper when I'm buying something for $500,000, $1 million because he's $100 cheaper. I'm not going to go, and I've gotten these calls where literally we get calls, I'm looking for an attorney, how much you charge? That's the first question. And God's honest truth, my response to them is, I'm not the right attorney for you if that's your first question. I'm not. You're asking the wrong question.
I say that to homeowners all the time. They're like, what's your commission? What's your commission? And I'm like, listen, I don't know if we're going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great, that there's some teams out there that are doing, 100, 200, 300 transactions. But at the end of the day, like, I want to go home and go to bed with the peace of mind that I did the right thing every single day and not, and maybe didn't do as many transactions, but all my clients are very happy with what I've done.